This is something I hadn't got time to go into because it's so long, but it's really interesting. This is a drawing from life that was made, believe it or not, by a so-called American Indian, the southern coast of California. He was a member of the Chumash, no longer exist. When the Spaniards met up with these people, they said, these are civilized Indians. They got along extremely well with them. The reason why they got wiped out, though, was because they had no immunity to the diseases that the Spaniards brought over. And so they were all wiped out. This is the last of them, about the mid of the early 19th century. They were a black people who built fantastic boats. They were like Viking boats, believe it or not. They were lab-straked, over one plank over the other, so they were very resilient in the water. They had a tradition that they did not originate in America. They came from this great island out across the Pacific, and they lived in a number of islands off of California. One of them was Santa Barbara. You've heard that, Santa Barbara. And they called Santa Barbara Limu. That was their name for it. So this man, probably the last of the Chumash, one of the last of the Chumash, represents one of these people from Mu, the very early times. These are representations from Ivan Van Sertima's book. You've got one of them here. It's excellent. These are one of the Olmec heads. This is one of the figurines that are found throughout Mexico. What's interesting is that these people are never portrayed as servile or slavish. They're always portrayed as prosperous, as bringing things, bringing metals. Oh, I forgot to mention, too, a grave was found in the Virgin Islands of a skeleton that was dated back to about, not too long ago, to maybe about 1200 AD. But still, centuries before Columbus came here, definitely had a black skull, negroid skull, and he was buried with an iron tool. Well, according to what we've been told, the people in Virgin Islands had no iron, but the Mali were great iron workers. This is another one of the numerous figurines that were found in a burial urn with gold and so forth. So it's obviously done out of respect. This is from a place called La Venta, Mexico. It's dated to about 200 AD. This is a beautiful obsidian ware. It was dark, you could see. This is a beautiful black obsidian, which apparently shows a boy bearing, this is not in a servile position, by the way. This is a religious position. This represents the heavens. He's holding up the heaven. There's a Mixtec inscription up here, meaning that this is the sky. So he's not being oppressed or anything. It might look that way, but it isn't. He's holding up the sky. This is dated, well, they haven't got a good date on it because you cannot date obsidian. But they did find some material around it, which may or may relate to its date. This goes back to early Maya time. Extreme northern reaches of the Maya civilization. This represents a person of great influence. This is found on the west coast of Mexico. The name escapes me now. The west coast of Mexico. I'm sorry, I forgot the site. He's sitting down. He's squatting down. This is the emblem of kingship. He's bearded. The Mayas did not grow facial hair at all. This is another one. This is a terracotta head from about 2,000 years ago. This is from the Atlantic coast. This is around La Venta also. This is one of the great Olmec heads. And when the archaeologists first saw these, they said, well, they're just typically Indians, you know. And but then they always neglect to say, well, how come the artists who made these always made them out of black basalts? You know, if they're Indians, why are they choosing that to work in? And this is part of this helmet, this marvelous helmet, which nobody could understand. There's no other parallel for this helmet found anywhere in the world except West Africa. Plus you have the, and then they said, well, they flattened the features so when they carved them, they could move them around without breaking them. And then it was found that they were carved right where they always were. They were never moved. The artists, to give you an idea how these things, how marvelous they are, they weigh over 11 tons apiece, and they were carried 200 miles. This is before the age of machinery, folks. You know, it's all handmade. Whoever got this, they were carried from the Tluxla Mountains, which are 200 miles away, 11 tons. They were set up, and then they were carved. So the archaeologists were proved wrong again. Some have suggested the reason why there's just heads is because, well, there's two theories on that, although one of these theories is getting outdated now. One, that these were sacrificed victims. There was a game that the Aztecs called was Tlachtli. And in this game, you had to keep this ball in the air all the time. It's a big rubber ball, and the ball represented the sun. And it was played by two different teams. And the team that won, the captain of the team, he had his head cut off. Now, the reason why he did have his head cut off was because he was greatly honored that way in this great victory of getting the ball through the hoop. By having him killed at that moment of victory, it was believed his soul would go straight to heaven. So some people believe that this is a representation of one of those team leaders. It may or may not be, but that doesn't explain the helmet. So they probably are representations more of kings than of sports figures. This is a fanciful representation, but not that fanciful, of what Mu may have looked like from all of the descriptions. It was a mountainous place. It was very large. More information has come out. There's been a marvelous discovery underwater of something called the Philippine Plate. And it's about the size of Texas. It's under the Pacific, and it was dry land, they figure, about 12,000 years ago, and it's slowly sinking even deeper today in the Central Pacific. It was a mountainous land. Their architecture appears to have been very squarish. This is similar to the Olmec heads. The heads may have been placed up high, not just sitting on the ground, may have been placed on things, these gigantic, colossal representations of human head. They were great seafarers. These are navigable rivers, but they also had a lot of great canals. So this is possibly what this land of Mu looked like. This would be the origin of human civilization. If that's proved, if Mu was the place where civilization began, well then, you know, the contribution of blacks not only to America but to the world is profound, because this is where it all started. Now this is an artist's conception, but now we have some real photographs, or we shall. I guess I should just run through this very fast. The story is that Mu was prosperous, but of course it was on an area known as the Ring of Fire, and that's in the Pacific. The whole Pacific is surrounded by severe volcanic activity. And one day this activity was stimulated horribly when you have this tremendous onrush of water into the Pacific from the glaciers that are melting, and that started a lot of seismic activity. A lot of volcanism took place on the island of Mu, which was a giant island. And here be a representation of their civilization. They did have turrets, by the way. That appears to be a representation of some of their artwork. Caused a lot of tidal activity. A tsunami is a giant tidal wave that's caused by an earthquake. They're actually sea quakes. And the island of Mu may have suffered something like this. The civilization was threatened by the onrush of lava, volcanic activity, and eventually these great waves came and rushed in over the civilization and buried it underwater, smashed it with these great tsunamis. And this is part of the legend now, the fanciful thing of the Great Flood, which appears in worldwide myths, and covered it completely. Now, in 1995, scuba divers off the coast of Okinawa, just sports divers, started to find some very strange-looking features underwater. Some of these photographs are taken from the Japanese press. It hasn't made much publicity in this country. It's been on CNN, but that's about all. Some of these photographs are taken from a video. Others are from the Japanese magazines. And the divers began to find this. This is the first one they found. This is about 100 feet underwater. This is a great plaza. The remains of a stairway, some kind of a walkway. This is off the island of Yonaguni, which is not far from Okinawa. This is part of this great stair. Here's a scuba diver you can see. It's about 100 feet underwater. This is coral incrustation. So they know that it's been underwater a very long time. It's a huge building. It's so big. These buildings are so huge that they're difficult to take in with one shot of the camera, especially because underwater your visibility is limited, of course. Here's another view of another plaza. It's almost like a section of a pie. It's enormously huge. These are 3 divers behind there, so you can kind of see. Now it's in good shape. These structures are in good shape, which means they probably weren't hit by earthquakes so much as when the water just rose over them. And this looks like the remains of Mu, this triracial or multiracial origin of civilization. It's another shot of divers here. These stairways that are underwater probably were for processions because they're very wide. So we assume that there were dozens and dozens of people in wonderful costumes. They would climb up these stairs to great plazas where they would hold their rituals. This is to give you some idea again of the size. These are just little divers here. The structure is just enormous. And the people that built this were the people of Mu. And this tradition survives over the course of many centuries. This is a Japanese archaeologist now. And when this thing was first found, they thought, well, maybe it's a natural formation. But then they did measurements, and they found that all the angles are at almost perfect 90-degree angles, and nature doesn't work that way. So it's been confirmed as absolutely man-made. It has these huge ramparts. You can just walk on these things like almost for miles. This all looks very, very ceremonial, very, very spiritual, very religious. Our society, you know, if we were wiped out, you come back, everything would seem very mercantile and materialistic, and not much would survive. But here, the emphasis seems to be on the spiritual aspects a lot. A lot of processional ways for showing off clothing and rituals with the gods, ceremonies for the gods. This is another strange flight of steps that terminates like this. Mostly these are stairways. This is a diver again going away. An enormous block. Now this one is the best I could get of this, but this is one of the early pieces that was found last summer. Excuse me, a year ago last summer. It's an enormous arch. It's a gate, and you can see here all the stones are fitted very beautifully. Some of this masonry does not appear at all in Japan. The Japanese never built anything like this. But it does appear in 2 places. It appears in Peru, amongst the Incas, and also amongst some stonework found in North Africa, a place called Lixus. So, again, there's some interesting parallels here. This is an enormous archway, and here you can see this is a diver on the other side swimming through it. Again, it's too big to fit in the picture. This is, again, the same plaza. Hopefully we'll get some better shots when we get over there. We're planning our own photo expedition over there. This is the remains of a canal or a channel of some kind. And these little steps here are not to walk on, but to facilitate the speed with which the water goes down. So this was all cut on dry land one time. This is for irrigation of some kind. Again, these enormous blocks. Here's the diver here again for size. This is almost like an enormous throne here with an armrest. This is a drawing, of course, from Japanese television. This is one of the structures which is so huge it can't be photographed, at least not yet anyway. You have these enormous blocks of stone, this roadway that goes for like about a quarter of a mile across the bottom of the ocean, and then these steps that go all the way to the top. We presume that when this was dry land, before the water went over the top, there were gods, idols, a temple, something like that. And again, this is dated to about 10,000 years ago. This is another. The Japanese went to a lot of trouble to make this enormous model. This model is like about 30 feet long. And this shows one section of it, what it looks like. There's a flight of stairs that goes up, and then there's a long processional way, and there are these 2 pylons on either side. The problem is we started thinking like the colonists to know what true our leaders started dropping it. The problem is we started thinking like the colonists to know what true our leaders started dropping it. The problem is we started thinking like the colonists to know what true our leaders started dropping it. The problem is we started thinking like the colonists to know what true our leaders started dropping it. It's a ceremonial building, a public building of some kind. At the top are these 2 appears that it has been same. So the dates for that are pretty reliable. This is an overhead view of one of the structures. Again, basically what it would look like. This is of course a drawing. This is one of the models that the Japanese have done. I'll give you a general idea what it looks like. Apparently, this was natural rock, which the ancients terraformed or molded in their own way, and then they built platforms. This is just a model of a boat, again, for size. And that's all. I just wanted to be able to share that with you. If you have any questions on this, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them. And yes, sir.
Question about the gentleman holding his arms out. What was that standing on the structure?
Oh, let me just run that back then real fast for you. I think that's probably a model of a boat. Oh, that?
It's in the air.
Yeah, this is a model of a boat, just to give an idea for size. This yacht's about 40 feet long in real life, and this is to show you how big the structure is overall. It appears that there were like houses or some kind of temple foundations on top. They've all been washed away, of course. They were wood, and all that remains is the stone. But
Who do the Japanese say these people were?
the Japanese are saying just exactly what I told you. They believe the same thing. They have traditions of mu that go back centuries or thousands of years. But the real research on the triracial aspect of it came out about 1876 by a guy by the name of James Churchward. He was a colonel in the British Army. And he spent his whole life researching this before it was found. And he gathered up all the traditions of the time, the Japanese, the Polynesians, and so on. And the theme that came back over and over again was this triracial idea of these. And sometimes, like the Polynesians, didn't even know about whites or blacks because they were so isolated, some of them in their islands. But they said that's part of our tradition, that there was this black people who shared power with the brown people who they were descended from. So this is now being accepted by the Japanese because Churchward is like big authority on mu. Well, the origin of human life in Africa goes back long before this even. This is the origin of civilization, not of man or of life. That took a long time for human beings to rise up from their earlier beginnings to become civilized. This appears to be where man reached civilization. It took a long time. It took maybe, well, hundreds of thousands of years at least. Yes? It's really strange to see these giant steps. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know about the extraterrestrials, but it's interesting you mention about the giants, because the Polynesians have said about how giants did build these places. And there's all kinds of stories. So I don't know that they were actually giants, but they might have been very, very tall people. That's right. Yeah. These structures are all oriented east and west. That means that they oriented with the rising and setting of the sun. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, you've done good research. Yeah. Well, if you have no further questions, I really thank you for coming and letting me share this with you. I think this is interesting and important stuff, and we're going to be featuring more of it in our magazine. Yes?
I have a question concerning these tablets and these letters. What do the letters look like?
The letters, they look like part Egyptian, they look part Phoenician, but they're not. They look kind of Phoenician, they look kind of Egyptian. Now, some of the letters are Egyptian, and you can translate words, but you can't translate a whole sentence. So it's like a mix of something. But they haven't figured out what that language is on those plates yet. It looks Egypto-Phoenician. The plates are all being held by Mr. Russell Burroughs. He is the discoverer of the cave. And he has them all warehoused, and well, he sold some. He sold some to professional investigators who've done tests on them. And it was important for him to do that because these investigators have proved that they're authentic. If he had just kept them, people say, well, maybe you made them, So they've been thoroughly tested and found they are real. They're real in the sense that they are ancient, that they were made 2,000 or more years ago. And so all this is going to be coming out soon. It's coming out in our magazine, the next issue. We're not going to be the only ones that are covering it. It's going to be, there's a television special made now, going to be out early next year. It's called The Mystery Cave of Many Faces. At least that's the name they're using for it now. The cave is located in southern Illinois. Pardon me? He has not disclosed exactly where because he's afraid that people will go in there and destroy it. But he just told us it's around Olney, Illinois, if you know where that is. Olney, it's like, okay, I'll give you an idea. It's like 120 miles southeast of St. Louis. Yes, sir.
You see a lot of these movies, a lot of things that flag in the government, but these secrets are revealed in the seed and sometimes more often.
Yeah.
Why is it that they haven't done this with this?
Well, I think that there's all kinds of political reasons involved. People have their own personal agendas, and I don't want to really talk on that because I don't know why they would not want to share this. The only thing I know is that there's a new generation of people coming up now who are open to the possibility of people from Africa, especially from Mali, who came here and did great things. So it's coming out now.
I'm suspicious that the government has in the seed with this particular thing.
I don't know. The government is very hard to second guess, So our opposition, or the only opposition we found to this, it really comes not from the government, but from old-style archaeologists. The reason why is because an archaeologist can't make much money by themselves. Archaeology doesn't pay. The only way you can make money being an archaeologist is to write a book, and you go to class, you have a class you teach, and you make all the students buy your book, see? And your ideas are in that book. And if somebody comes along and says, oh, no, there was somebody here before Columbus, then he's going to object to that because he doesn't have that in his book, see? So there we're getting resistance from these old-style archaeologists, but they can't stop it now because it's too well documented. Yes, sir?
Does this shake some of the now standing secret societies as far as what they've been teaching their memberships? It would kind of like shake their foundations to the point of what?
Well, I think some of these secret societies, I mentioned like the Masons, for example, the Masons have known about some of this for a long time, but they keep it all to themselves, a part of their lodges. And so now some of the stuff is going to be public knowledge, so it'll be interesting to see how they react.
It wouldn't be any, in other words, the money that people spend would be sort of like, for what?
Well, I don't know. I can't
That's
say
what
that.
I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't think I can answer that authoritatively. I'm just a reporter. I'm not a political scientist or an archaeologist. And my job is just to get this stuff out. Well, I got to be honest about it. Okay. I didn't think it was that much, but I know that there have been traces of blacks found in China. And that also is suppressed or just not publicized at all. But I never heard of a number quite that huge. And that the Chinese knew about it like for many, many years. But that's part of the migration from Mu through the Pacific, it appears. Yes? No, not in the islands of Japan so much. But it's an interesting point that the Japanese people represent, a homogeneous race. But the people on Okinawa, they're racially different. They're racially very, very different. And they don't even speak the same language. The people on Okinawa don't even consider themselves Japanese. So it looks like there's some other influences at work there over a very long period of time. Something. Yes, ma'am.
You said that Mu or whatever was the first civilization.
It looks that way.
This is supposed to be before the ancient Egypt?
Yes. 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 Right. See, there have been legends about this civilization before Egypt, but no proof. But now, with the DNA testing, with these structures found off of Japan, there's a lot of indication that what we're looking at is, in fact, Mu. And also, just to study the legends of the Polynesians, where they talk about it. I mean, you don't have a myth that survives for hundreds or thousands of years without having a kernel of truth behind it. And all these are just different pieces of a puzzle which are coming together. So yeah, Mu looks like the first civilization. It does. Atlantis? That's a whole other subject. I can't even begin to get into that now. maybe another lecture. I'm sorry. But I'm kind of focused on this. Well, I think a valid point you bring up, we are taught in school that the earliest civilizations are Egyptian and Mesopotamian, that nobody came over to America except Columbus. I think these are all outdated ideas. We're going to find that there were many people here before Columbus and that there were several civilizations before Egypt, that those people got their ideas from places like Mu. Maybe Mu isn't the oldest. Maybe there was some even before that. I don't know. But we do know this is before Egypt. I would not rule out Atlantis or even other places we don't even know about yet.
Sir, are you familiar with metaphysics?
I like metaphysics a lot. I'm interested in it, but I try to keep it separate from this. Yeah. The fifth. Yeah. Right, right. That's Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophists. Oh. Well, you're ahead of me there, I think. Yes, yes. Right, very interesting. That's the end of... Something big will happen then.
When you showed that other clip that I asked you to show back, it seemed as though, in my eyes, play no tricks on me, that it was being held in the air by itself, that model ship that was standing.
Oh, he just had a thin wire that held it up, that's all. Yeah, sure. Pretty much
That's
for that.
what I want to know. You sure they had the wire?
Yeah, you can see it clearer on the video. I just took this off the video there. Yeah, he wasn't levitating his ship or anything.
All right, yeah.
So, okay. Well, any other questions? Well, again, thank you very much for allowing me to share this with you. And the Washita also is going to be carrying some of this in their newspaper.